Hello again, and welcome to a programme which today is concentrating on vegetarian dishes. This is for vegetarians, for semi-vegetarians, or for people like me who often like to eat meals without any meat. Well, the first recipe I want to show you today is for a broccoli souffle with 3 cheeses, which is nice to serve on a special occasion. It'll serve 4 people as a first course or 2 people as a main course. Now, you start off with 1 pound of broccoli. I trimmed the very thick stalky bits and then put it in a steamer and steamed it for about 6 to 10 minutes. It's got to be tender, but obviously not overcooked, so that it retains its lovely sort of crispness and lovely colour. Then you pop it into a food processor and you end up with a puree, a thick, coarse puree like this. Or if you haven't got a food processor, you could use a potato masher. Now, the next thing is the basis of the souffle, and the basis of it is a white sauce, sometimes called bechamel sauce. We've made this before in the series, but I'm just going to go over it with you. This is a very thick version, and it's made with 1 1/4 ounces of flour, 1 ounce of butter, and 1/4 pint of milk, and they have just been literally put in the saucepan over the heat, whisked together till you get this lovely thick, glossy paste. Now, in my bowl here, I've got 3 egg yolks, and I'm just going to put this bechamel in to join the egg yolks. And then I'm going to add the broccoli into the bowl. And then the 3 cheeses I told you about. First of all, I've got strong cheddar here, 1 ounce of strong cheddar. I've got 1 tablespoon of Parmesan cheese. This is Parmigiano Reggiano, the real Parmesan cheese. And here I've got Gruyere cheese. This is another ounce of Gruyere cheese. Now I'm going to use some seasonings. I've got 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. That gives it a nice kick. Freshly grated nutmeg. Always, always freshly grated. Never, never buy it ready grated, because you don't get the flavour. And what you want here is about 1/4 of a whole nutmeg grated. Then we need some salt and pepper, and you need quite a good seasoning of salt and pepper, because we're actually going to be adding, we've got 3 egg yolks, remember, but we're going to be adding 5 egg whites. So to get the seasoning through that, you need to be quite heavy-handed with the seasoning. Now, all we're going to do is just mix that all together and go in with your wooden spoon and just mix until everything's very, very, very thoroughly blended together. And that is the basis of the souffle. Now, the next stage of the souffle making is the egg whites, so I'm just going to run through all the egg white rules for you. First of all, you need a large, roomy bowl. Now, in here I've got 5 egg whites. But first of all, there is one important point to remember, and that is the bowl and the whisk must be absolutely grease-free. So you wash it in soapy water, rinse it in hot water, dry it with a clean tea cloth, and then if you want to be extra sure, you can just rub lemon round the whisk and round the bowl if you want to just make sure that you've got no grease, because grease stops the eggs from increasing in volume. Now, what I'm going to do is beat them up, but start with the whisk very, very slowly, because that's the correct way to beat them. So just switch it on slowly. The main ingredient in a souffle, obviously, is air. And what we're trying to do now is incorporate as much air as we can. And what you'll see there are bubbles beginning to form. Now we're going to switch on to the higher speed. And what's happening in there is that little elastic bubbles are beginning to form as the air gets whipped in. And they begin to expand and expand. And the secret with egg whites is to get the bubbles to expand as much as they can without bursting. So if you underbeat them, you've got less air. And if you overbeat them and they burst, you've still got less air. And what we want is as much air as we can possibly get. And the way to tell if the egg whites are ready is that they should stand up in stiff peaks. like that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is just fold the egg whites into the original mixture. And I'm just going to swap my bowls over here and show you that, first of all, before you fold egg whites in, you need to just have 1 tablespoon, just 1 tablespoon like that, to just slacken off the mixture. So you start with 1, and then you can have perhaps 2 or 3 lots to fold in. And you just use a cutting and folding movement. And the principles of folding egg whites is, again, centred on air, because you've got all those air bubbles and you don't want to lose them. So whatever you do, don't start mixing like this. That's disaster. So that's sort of loosened the mixture now, so we can go in with more egg whites, probably about 1/3 of them. Next, and then just carry on with these folding and cutting movements gently, just turning the mixture over like that. And just while I'm folding the last of the egg whites in, let me tell you, it works really well with Jerusalem artichokes. Just steamed and then chopped in the processor, and it works in the summer particularly well with courgettes. So there we are, little patience, and then all the egg whites have been folded into the mixture. And then the next thing I want to explain to you is a very, very important part of souffle making is the actual souffle dish itself. And this dish here, you'll see that it's quite small. In fact, it's only 5 inches in diameter. And what I've done is I've tied a collar of baking parchment round it, because I think it's nice to have fun with a souffle. And what I do is put it in a small dish, tie a collar round so that it comes up really high, and it looks more spectacular when you take it to the table. You'll also see that that's been very well buttered, and it's had a little dusting of Parmesan cheese just to make a lining. So now all I'm going to do is put the souffle mixture into the souffle dish, and then it can go in the oven. And whilst I'm pouring it in, just gently pour it in, and you'll find it'll come up about 1 inch above the dish. I'll explain the oven temperature. It needs a hot oven, gas mark 6 or the equivalent, and the souffle will cook in about 45 minutes altogether. And I always like to be optimistic, so I put it on a low shelf, just so there's enough room for it to really rise. In fact, when I tie a collar around it like this, I call it mile-high souffle, which I know is an exaggeration, but it does have a lovely, spectacular effect. Now, when you've got it into the souffle dish with a little collar around it like that, what you can then do is just ease it away from the edge with your finger of the paper. And if you do that all the way round, sometimes, not always, sometimes it gives you a little sort of hat on top of the souffle. And now finally I'm going to sprinkle on some Parmesan cheese, roughly about a tablespoonful, and then put it in the oven, leave it there for 45 minutes, and the next thing you'll see is the finished souffle. Now, because of the paper collar, you'll see here we have a spectacular rise. And all we're going to do now is just take off the string. Where's the string? Here it is. In fact, I'm going to cut that with the scissors. And then peel off the paper carefully. And if you find the souffle stuck to the paper, just use a knife like this to pull it away. And doesn't that look just absolutely amazingly wonderful? And now you can see why the small dish gives you this lovely, spectacular rise. And then I'm just going to cut a slice out now so that you can see what it looks like. And it should be really squidgy on the inside. You need it sort of slightly moist on the inside to get the full benefit, and then this lovely crusty bit on the outside. So let's just take that out now for you to have a look at the actual texture. There we go. I'll just have another bit there to make the portion right, a bit of squidge on the edge. And then I'll just turn it round now so you can see the actual texture there inside. And that's what I call mile-high souffle. I know it's an exaggeration, but it's pretty good. from one spectacular vegetarian recipe now to another. Now, you've probably heard of an apple tarte tatin in France. Well, this is one that's made with red onions and thyme. Begin by preparing some red onions. Cut them in half from stem to root. Get a 9-inch oven-proof pan really hot. Add an ounce of butter and a teaspoon of sugar. Then add a few sprigs of thyme. Now add the onions, cut side down, and fit any gaps with quarters of onion. What you have to do here is think jigsaw puzzle. Then add about a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar, a tablespoon of chopped fresh thyme, a good seasoning of salt and pepper, and then give it 10 minutes cooking with the heat high. Then cover and place in a medium oven, gas mark 4, for 50 minutes. After that, remove the foil, place it over direct heat and bubble away until all the juices become syrupy. Now cover the onions with a circle of short crust pastry made with cheese and herbs. Place it in a preheated oven, gas mark 6 or the equivalent, give it 25 minutes cooking time. When it's cooked, just loosen it all around the edges using a palette knife, then on a flat board, turn the pan upside down. The tart will fall out, and don't worry about any escaped bits of onion because they can just be reincorporated. So there it is, red onion tarte tatin. Right, so the next recipe I want to show you would either serve 4 people as a first course or 2 people as a light lunch or supper dish. And it involves what I think is a very special vegetable, and that's an aubergine. But you need to get an aubergine that's got good long length, because what's going to happen to it is it's going to be cut into slices, thin slices like this. And I've cut one, and I'm just going to cut the last thin slice off and show you what happens to the rest. And the aubergine, you need 1 for this recipe. The aubergine should weigh between 12 and 14 ounces. So that's the last slice going on the tray. And then the next thing you do is I've chopped the first slice, and I'm just going to chop the second slice now. And these are going to form part of the stuffing. So as soon as you've chopped the end pieces, these are on an oiled baking tray, and this is about 12 by 16 inches. And I'm just going to, first of all, brush them with olive oil and then put some pepper on them. So a little bit of really nice extra virgin olive oil is good on these. And then what's going to happen to them, after they've been oiled and had some pepper, is they're going to go into a preheated oven, and the oven is preheated at gas mark 4 or the equivalent, a medium oven. Now, no salt at this stage, because salt encourages the moisture to come out, and we don't want that to happen. The salt goes on a bit later when we put the stuffing in. So they're going to be popped into the oven now for just 15 minutes, because what I want to do is get them softened so that we can easily put the stuffing in. Now, over in my frying pan, I've got a medium onion that's been finely chopped and a clove of garlic, and they're all going to soften in 1 tablespoon of olive oil, together with the little pieces of aubergine. And the initial cooking for the aubergine and onion will be approximately 5 minutes, until they've softened and just turned slightly golden. Right, well, after 5 minutes, they will have turned a little bit golden and softened. And if you think the pan looks a little bit dry, you can just add a tiny bit more olive oil. And then we're going to add the rest of the ingredients. And I've got here, this is 3 tomatoes, and they've been skinned, de-seeded, and chopped. So we'll put those in first. And just to enrich the tomato flavour, I'm going to use some tomato paste. This is sun-dried tomato paste, which has a really lovely flavour, and it's quite widely available now. 2 teaspoons of that. Stir that in with the tomatoes. And then I'm going to add 6 anchovy fillets, and these have been drained from their oil and finely chopped. And I've got a rounded tablespoon of capers. These are small capers. These are quite special ones, actually, because they've actually been preserved in balsamic vinegar. Finally, some basil. And I've got about a tablespoon of basil leaves here, and I'm just going to tear the basil leaves because they don't need to be chopped too small. Just tear them up, add them to the pan. Turn the heat down now to a gentle heat and leave all that to cook for another 5 minutes. And then when it's cooked, remove the pan and let it get cool, because you want it to be cool enough to handle. What you need for the tomato stuffing is about a dessert spoonful per slice. Taste it first to check the seasoning. Arrange that along the centre, leaving a gap at each end. And now another ingredient that we haven't spoken about yet, another very Italian ingredient, and this is mozzarella cheese, which has a lovely melting consistency, and there's 5 ounces in the recipe altogether. Now, when you've got the filling on the slice like that, all you do is roll it up. And what you do is take the rounded end first and just roll it over quite lightly. You don't have to press very hard, quite lightly like that. And then you just place it in a well-greased baking dish. And next, just give each one a little brushing with oil on the surface. And it's going to have a topping now. And the topping I'm using is over here. And this actually is 1.5 level tablespoons of breadcrumbs and 2 level tablespoons of grated Parmesan cheese. So we're Italian all the way from beginning to end. Now just sprinkle an equal amount of that on top of each aubergine, stuffed aubergine slice. And then that goes into the oven, same temperature as before, medium oven, gas mark 4 or the equivalent, and they'll have 30 minutes cooking time. And here are the cooked stuffed aubergines. And for a first course, I would serve 2 of these for 1 person. You see all the cheese stretches. So there goes 1. And now we'll just take another one. 2. And just send it to the table garnished with a little bit of basil. So that's Italian stuffed aubergines. And now we're moving from Italian cheese to French cheese. And I want to show you a warm Roquefort cheesecake served with pears dressed in vinaigrette. First you need to make a base with 4 ounces of breadcrumbs, 1.5 ounces of pecorino cheese and some melted butter. Then you bake this in the oven for 10 to 15 minutes at about gas mark 5. While that's happening, begin to make the filling using 3 size 1 eggs and 8 ounces of curd cheese. Beat it all together till smooth. Then add 4 ounces of fromage frais and 6 ounces of Roquefort cheese. After that, a tablespoon of fresh snipped chives. Taste and season with a little salt and freshly milled black pepper. Then give it all a final stir. The base should now be really crisp, so just pour the mixture in on top. Then scatter a few finely chopped spring onions over the surface. Bake in the oven, gas mark 4 or the equivalent, for 35 to 40 minutes. Then take a ripe but still firm pear, make a little slip through the stalk to guide you, and then slice the pear in half. Remove the core, then place it on a hard flat surface and using a sharp knife, cut it in thin slices, leaving the stalk intact. Serve each pear half with a slice of warm Roquefort cheesecake and a spoonful of balsamic vinaigrette. Well, the next recipe I want to show you would make a really nice main course at any vegetarian meal. This is called black-eyed bean cakes, and you start off with some black-eyed beans, which are these here, which are rather cute little beans. But they have to be soaked first. So what you do is you put them in a pan, cover them with cold water and leave them overnight to soak. But if you forget to do that, there is another measure, because what you can do is you can bring them up to the boil them for 10 minutes, turn the heat out and leave them to soak for 2 hours. So that's a sort of shortcut soaking. There's lentils in this as well. Green lentils, they don't need soaking. And in fact, there's 4 ounces of each in the recipe, and a flavouring of herbs, which is bay leaf and thyme. Now, when the black-eyed beans have soaked overnight, or in the shortcut method, they swell up and they become sort of twice their size. And then you pack them into a saucepan with the herbs and the lentils, cover them again with water, fresh water this time, bring them up to the boil and cook them for about 45 minutes. And in 45 minutes, by magic, here we are, they look like this. And they're quite sort of soft and quite squidgy. And what I'm now going to do is mash them. But first of all, I'm going to use a fork. Now, if you like, you can do all the mashing with a fork. It doesn't actually take that long, but there is a little shortcut method here, and that is mashing them with the electric hand whisk. So I've just broken them up now. You can see they're becoming a puree, and I'm just going to finish off with this. Right, that's the basic mix for the black-eyed bean cakes. Now we're going to add some vegetables, and over here I've had a pan heating with a tablespoon of oil, and it's looking good and hot now. And I'm going to add to it 1 carrot that's been chopped, a large carrot that's been chopped finely. This is a red onion, a medium red onion. This is a small red pepper, been chopped in the same way. And this is a green chilli that's been de-seeded and chopped, one of the milder fat chilies, de-seeded and chopped. And here is a chopped clove of garlic. Turn the heat down to medium and cook them for about 6, maybe 7 minutes until the vegetables are tender. So there we are. Now the vegetables are tender and they've got nice crusty toasted edges to them. So we're going to take those over now so that they can join the lentils and black-eyed beans. There we are. And now we're going to have some more flavourings in here. First of all, mace. And I'm going to use 1/4 teaspoon of mace, 1 teaspoon of chopped fresh thyme, and 1 tablespoon of sun-dried tomato paste. A good seasoning of salt and freshly milled pepper. Now this all has to be combined together, and then as soon as the mixture's cool enough to handle, you can form it into cakes. Take a handful like that, a little bit more, and then just press it together with your hands. Give it a good sort of firm press. And then the next stage is to give them a coating. Now what I've got here is whole wheat flour, and all I'm going to do now is just coat that in whole wheat flour. But you could use beaten egg and fine breadcrumbs, or if you live in an area where there's a Jewish community, you can use matzah meal, which is lovely. It's not very widely available, but it makes a lovely coating. And then what you do with those is you fry them in hot oil for 3 minutes on each side, and then you serve them with a delicious sauce, which I'm now going to show you. And the recipe is called onion and ginger marmalade, and you start off with 12 ounces of onions, and they're thinly sliced, very thinly sliced into rings. And the first thing you do is you put 2 tablespoons of oil in a pot like this, bring it up to really high temperature, and then brown the onions. That'll take about 6 or 7 minutes in hot fat to get them to this stage, which is nicely sort of caramelized at the edges. And now they're going to have some more ingredients added to them. First, ginger. And this is the dessert spoon of freshly grated ginger. And then I've got some sprigs of rosemary here. 3 sprigs like that. You can just break them up a little bit and take them out before you serve it. And it's an unusual combination, but it works really well, ginger and onions. And then I've got 2 tablespoons here of dark, soft brown sugar. So that'll go in next. And that's followed by some liquid. And the liquid I'm going to use is 8 fluid ounces of dry white wine. Stir that in. And that's followed by 3 tablespoons or 2 fluid ounces of white wine vinegar. So you've got some sweet and you've got some sharp. Now you need to turn the heat down to its very, very lowest setting. If your lowest setting isn't very low, you can use a heat diffuser. And then finally, it's going to have some seasoning, some salt and some freshly milled pepper. And then after 1 hour and 20 minutes, that will have reduced down to a sticky marmalade consistency. So after 1 hour and 20 minutes, this is what the ginger and onion marmalade looks like. The onions reduce down to a lovely sort of melted, mellow consistency, and the flavour is absolutely superb. And although this goes very, very well with the bean cakes, it also goes with lots of other things as well. It's a generally really nice sauce to serve with lots of different kinds of food. So that's a real winner of a vegetarian recipe. Now I'd like to show you some menus for entertaining vegetarians. We begin with a 5-star first course. This is a light, crisp pastry shell filled with a concentrated wild mushroom mixture and a softly baked egg. This is a classic old favourite. It's moussaka, only this time made with vegetables, aubergines and 2 types of lentils. It's got a ricotta cheese topping and I promise you won't miss the meat. This is an oven-baked risotto made with roasted and sun-dried tomatoes, a hint of saffron, and then served with shavings of Parmesan cheese. And now something for a vegetarian supper party. This is a strudel made with gorgonzola picante cheese, mozzarella, apples and leeks, and then the whole thing is encased in a lovely crisp phyllo pastry shell. Well, I hope you enjoy making all of those recipes, and I hope you'll come back next time when we're doing a programme all about how to make pancakes and marmalade.